Welcome everyone. Today we're going to have a wonderful opportunity to talk to and have a conversation with Dr. Bill Honig. He's going to be talking about the implications for leadership in the implementation of the Common Core, specifically on what's happening in California, what are some resources and places you can go to get expertise and a vision for implementation of the Common Core. But first we want to, of course, thank our sponsors, AXA, TCAL, Wilson Consulting, and Blackboard Collaborate, and the Learning Revolution Project, of course, as well. So thank you for making this entire summit possible. I'm going to go ahead and give you all editing rights to the whiteboard. And if you click the little sun icon on the left toolbar, please tell us where you're from. And because this is a California-specific session, I'm assuming we're going to have a lot of California-specific stars. And thank you for adding your star to the map. And we have somebody on the East Coast, but again, because Common Core is a national conversation, I think it's definitely relevant. The session will be relevant for you as well. So thank you. And without any further ado, I welcome Dr. Bill Honig.
Thank you. I'm going to give a little background of the implementation of Common Core in California. It's a little different than many other states. Back under the previous administration, Common Core standards were adopted in the state by the state board. And then when Governor Brown got elected, the new state board readopted them. There were some changes. I'm the chair of the Instructional Quality Commission, and our job is to take the standards and then adopt frameworks, which I'll go into in a little while, what those are and how you find them. And they're very helpful in making the transition from standards to an actual curriculum and instruction. So that was done a couple of years ago, and the frameworks were adopted. The math framework was adopted just early this year, and materials were adopted for recommendation pursuant to that in January of this year. And the English Language Arts and ELD framework have been combined. English Language Development Framework standards have been combined into one framework, and that's will be out in April for its second review by the public. So that's right in the middle. I'm going to refer to an article which we'll put up on the screen here, and you can get it for yourselves if you click on that purple link in the middle. That will get you there, or you can basically, well, try that. And if anybody has a problem, just do it on the chat line. But that will, if you do that, Jason, if you do that and click on that, we can go through that article a little bit. This was written under the sponsorship of a group that came together in California. We did have standards with the legislature provided $1.25 billion for implementation funds. There's a local control initiative in the state, a local funding initiative, which gives money down to the local districts to figure out how to basically make their own choices within broad guidelines. So all this is happening at the same time. So there's governor support for Common Core. The superintendent of public instruction, Tom Torlakson, has also been an advocate for this, for these standards, and the frameworks were done under his department's auspices and the state board. The state board has been very supportive, and all the organizations, AXA, school boards, the CTA and the AFT. So we have a pretty, a lot of the advocacy groups like Ed Trust West, and we have a very, very strong collaborative effort in the state. So since it's been somewhat delegated down to the local districts on implementation, many of us came together and thought, what can we do to help the implementation in the state? And this is what's a little different in this state. We have strong support for Common Core. We disentangled Common Core from some of the more controversial strategies that were associated with it, like heavy test teacher evaluation or high consequences, test-based consequences, and so forth. those are much more local choice, but and the state took on the federal government on whether that was going to be mandated or not when we tried to go for a waiver because we postponed testing for a couple of years to give people a chance to work this through the system the way New York is now doing. So anyway, we got together, all these groups, and we said, what can we do to help out the local folks, the leadership at the local level, either school, we're trying to figure out how to help them do that. So Long Beach has been part of that group, and Pam Slater, Pam from Long Beach, on this article, collaborated with this article, and that's what we're showing you right here. Now let's see, I think I've got follow me. Let's see. All right. How do I, okay, you can go up to the top there if you can. There you go. Okay, so it starts out by saying this article is to address this leadership issue, which is many districts and schools are going directly from standards to units of instruction or individual lesson plans. And that, I think, leaves something to be desired, because what's really necessary is to figure out, it's a good exercise to do that. Teachers are involved, but you miss some attributes, and many of the units that have been done are good project-based units, but they're not the whole ball of wax. They don't cover the scope and sequence adequately. So this article we all thought was a really good corrective. We did a survey of all the different districts. I think we got 85% response, 90% response. The counties are part of this too, the county offices of education. And they did this survey, and they found that only about a third to 40% were actually focusing on the instruction and curriculum necessary to implement Common Core. Some states, such as New York, have adopted, Engaged New York has adopted, for example, math curriculums and ELA, English Language Arts curriculums, and they're available for free. But in California, we have adopted math books, but it's really a local choice. So one of the issues is how you organize it, how you mix and match. So this is an article to try and give local districts resources, and it's good for people in other states too, if they're interested. So the first part starts out by showing what Long Beach did and gives a site to the Long Beach scope and sequence right there for those of you who are interested. And it's very detailed on how they did it. Anybody can share it. If you want another big district in California that's done the same thing, and that's Santa Ana Unified, they have a website. You could just Google it and look it up. They have a good scope and sequence. But they are sharing some units that originally were done in a network called the core districts, but they found the units were just project-based and left big gaps in instruction, and they tried to fill in those gaps, especially in the foundation skill area. They wanted to make sure that youngsters got that, learn phonics and how to decode words and so forth. So anyway, let's scroll down and we can go to the next sort of resources. As we go down here, this is all about what Long Beach did. Okay, the first number one here, where it says State Board of Education has adopted the California Mathematics Curriculum Framework. Framework is specifications for the architecture of what to think about when you actually organized instruction. So, for example, in the standards say in 7th grade, use proportional thinking to solve problems. That's the standard. Well, how much time? What kind of activities? What's the sequence of doing that? How do you check to see if youngsters are getting it? Actually, it's fairly difficult to get to understand proportional reasoning and how to use it in applications. And percentage, for example, takes time to do that, 5-6 weeks for percentage if you're really going to do it right with a lot of language mediation. That's in the framework, is suggestions on how to do that. It's not a curriculum, it's specifications for a curriculum. So that's really useful if you're trying to think through what you want to do at your local school or district level. Number two is English language and English language EL, English language arts and English language development. That is now in its second review. Tomorrow we're going to be adopting the Glad for 60-day review. It will be up on the website, this website that you can click on here. The new draft will be up mid-April. That's really useful for those states that have high levels of second language youngsters, because we've integrated that. When they did the English language development standards, they basically base it on Common Core. And so what we've done is, in doing that framework, we have used, we've taken a broader picture, which is we want youngsters to be broadly literate, whoever they are, be well-read, the joy of reading, and all those kinds of good liberal arts arguments. But we also organized the framework around 5 big ideas: getting meaning from text, language issues such as vocabulary and language structure and syntax and academic language, expression issues, both written and oral expression, the content connections, which the National Common Core Standards make a big issue out of connecting with history and literature and science and so forth, humanities, and using those in developing this both English and mathematics skills. And the final one is and it doesn't mean it's the last, they're co-equal, is foundation, learning to decode, learning how to break up a word in the English language, syllabication issues, fluency issues, writing conventions, spelling, like that. So that's number 2, and you can get a general sense from that by looking. We think it's a pretty exciting framework. The math framework, by the way, was reviewed by national experts, people that did the national standards, Phil Darrow and Bill McCullum and from Arizona, who did the progressions document, and Karen Poussin, well-respected people, and they just say it's one of the best documents around as far as what it's supposed to do. And number 3, as I said, this was done in January, this article. Those books have been adopted. They're not required to be used, but they're advice to local districts, so anybody in the country or in the districts in California can take a look at these. There are 31 of them. Bill Schmidt came out and said, the texts are horrible in mathematics. They're just shams. They don't really address the Common Core. Well, in our review, we had extensive review, and we went through every standard and every cluster in our framework and our standards, and we made sure the books address them. So you can at least take our assurances that the books on this list, both digital and regular print, although those are hybrids usually, have done that job. So number 4 is really important. I'll come back to that after I go through 6 and 7, 8. But I want to go into the number 4 a little bit more, the leadership planning guide, because that's germane to the topic we're talking about. So number 5 is really a good, useful resource. Hanover did a study, I think funded by Gates, and they looked at what each state in the country was using as its resources to back up implementation of standards. So they went to New York or Georgia or Kansas, and what are they using? And so this is a great, everything's on there. They're a really good source. And then the Department of Education has brokers of expertise. They list a lot of materials for California, and I think it's really useful. And as I've mentioned, many districts in this state and other states have got their own websites with a lot of good resources on there. Okay, we're now going to application sharing this stop. So we want to go to the planning guide if we can.
Okay, one moment.
Well, let's see. Roland loves putting leave it love read. That's a really good point, because one of the criticisms of Common Core is it's too instrumental. And in other words, it talks about voice and narrative and analyzing the author's intent and multiple sources. All those are good things. And strategies and comprehension strategies, but they can be overdone. And what gets lost sometimes is we also want kids to have an independent reading program, to basically read things out of school too, and to become broadly literate. And as I said, to love reading, to understand how the world works and how people interact, and about culture and all those kinds of good things that we'd like all kids to dip into. And we made sure that was stated very specifically and heavily in the framework. It's not just career and college, also civic readiness, ready to be a citizen, and reaching potential and broadly literate. So, so I think that's. Hold down to number 4 and click on that. Then take a look at that. Jason, is that working?
I'm entering it in right now. It opened up a new window, so let me put it in the. There it goes.
Oh, okay, there we go. This is the Leadership Planning Guide, and this was done by the collaborative after requests from local districts, many of our local districts, and people implementing Common Core. What should we be thinking about as we go through this? What are some of the goals to watch out for? I mentioned one, going directly from standards to units without thinking through the scope and sequence of the curriculum. So this planning guide was done, published, I think, last winter, and people have been using it in the state, and the feedback we've been helpful. It could be helpful in other states too, because hit the major issues. So what we did is we took 10 big areas that could be talked about at the local level, either as a policy from the board, superintendent level, or within the district administration, or as implementation in school sites. If you go to page 7, I think you can go on this link. Are you following me as I go down here? Is this working for you?
No, they're going to have to go to page 7 on their own because it's a PDF. So you guys can click on the little arrow on
guys, has to go to page 7 right there. And anybody having a problem, just chat and we'll try and fix it for you. But he's got the link right there. Jason's put the link. If you go there and just go to number 7, it'll load a PDF file. So you can see these 5 areas, and what this planning guide does is goes into each of these areas in detail. The first one is capacity building and leadership development. This is both for the district, the schools, the districts we've seen have planning teams for implementation of Common Core. They've got coaching. They've got training of principals. They've decided on what to do in all these different areas. I mean, they basically are organized. And if they're smaller, they've worked it out with their local county or intermediate support group. So we found that, and there's a lot of good advice in there. Communication, stakeholder engagement, there's a lot written in the country about how to engage, how to argue for Common Core, how to get people to understand it. The homework may look a little different, all these kinds of things. So what's actually going on? What's going on with testing? What do you do about acceleration for algebra? For example, big issue on communication is Common Core math standards as adopted in California. Basically, well, the standards themselves nationally take 1/3 to 1/2 of what was taught in the algebra course at 9th grade and is now taught to all 8th graders. So a big hunk of algebra is taught to everybody. Most people aren't aware of that. So they're worried that their child's not taking algebra in the 8th grade. They're getting a good hunk of it. And the algebra, the 9th grade course, is now the rest of algebra, plus borrowing some from intermediate algebra with heavy statistics. And there too, you can go integrated math as an alternative or traditional sequencing. So all that is, there's a great appendix by Neil Finkelstein in the Common Core, in the mathematics framework that I talked about earlier, which really goes into what some other, Massachusetts has a really good way of doing this and so forth. So there's some alternatives for those kids who want to accelerate because they want to get to calculus by the 5th year, take a 5th year course in high school. But you don't want to put youngsters in there who aren't necessarily ready, and you might want to extend algebra, the 9th grade algebra, over a 2-year period for those that have to take it slower if they're going to get it. The statistics are pretty horrifying. Large number in California, we've done a good job getting more kids to take 8th grade algebra and pass it, but we still have huge numbers that flunk it and go on to take it a second time and don't do as well. So it is a flexibility issue. That's all talked about in there, and that's like a communication issue. Curriculum instruction, I've mentioned a little bit about that article I did and how you go to curriculum instruction and scope and sequence, and there's some good pointers in here. A big issue for districts now is, are they going to adopt the basal text? Do I have money to do that? I just did some units, so now why do I have to adopt the basal text? Well, many districts are mixing and matching. They're taking the architecture from, let's say, our math framework, which is the architecture underlying the standards and the progressions, and they're saying, maybe we'll use the following materials for this, and maybe we'll fill in here, or maybe we'll go to, there's Engage New York did a math curriculum, or you can go to commoncore.org. COMMO, commoncore.org, which is not Common Core, it's a liberal arts advocacy group, and it has a Eureka Math, which is based on that. So there's all these resources around, and there's open source resources, and one of the things we're going to do is with foundation support, is develop some protocols, maybe with other states and the business community, to help districts on how you review the field and mix and match and put together the support for this curriculums. If you want a good scope and sequence, sometimes it's just you can go to just buy one of the books and look at what they did. That usually is very helpful too. Then the next one is line instructional materials and electronic resources. How does it in? And that's part of what I was just talking about. Professional development obviously is key, and as I said, in California, there's $1.25 billion that went into technology, professional development, and adoption of materials. This year, there's probably going to be another slug for that, and districts got an increased funds because of the new local funding mechanism. But professional development is, in its modern version, is much more consistent with the way business does it. The secret to implementing Common Core. Common Core is great, in my opinion, because it is the kind of instruction we've all been talking about for years. Much more active instruction, questioning, discussion, conceptual understanding of math, and along with procedural knowledge and the ability to apply that in a whole variety of different situations. Back when Phil Darrow and these others talk, they say, one of the most important parts coming out, a student should have coming out of math is not necessarily Algebra 2, but the ability to use what they got in 8th grade in a variety of complex situations. If you can use percentage and fractions and graphing and thinking and ratio, that's what people use in their life. And a lot of, they've done studies of, for example, Algebra 2 students who can't even solve, 85% of them can't solve a basic proportion problem. So we're not doing the job well enough. Common Core addresses that, the assessment from Smarter Balance for our state. And they are going to have questions on application of for high school kids, application of 8th grade math in sophisticated situation. And not implement that kind of curriculum with reading a book and discussing it. It seems along that line. Somebody put the mute on your typing, because you can't really do this unless you build strong professional learning communities around implementation of Common Core. I tried this out. Come and watch me in my classroom. Give me some pointers. Let's talk about, is this working or not working? So a district has to know how to support that team building. And our best districts, Sanger, Long Beach, Sacramento, a lot of these districts in California that have really done so well, they have extensively for the last 4 or 5 years built made that a high priority, is building teamwork at the school site. And then that, of course, means that you need to have your principals know how to encourage that and support it, and that's a huge job for principals on principal training on how basically to understand Common Core implementation, understand the broader liberal arts implications for the other subjects, that you can't neglect science and history and those kinds of things, and that in the elementary level, and that you need to build this capacity at that local level, the ability to continuously look at what you're doing and how to do it better. That's what other countries and the best districts and the best states have done, and that seems to separate the mediocre from the world class. So learning feedback system assessment, we made a big pitch. Don't put all your eggs in final assessment, in summative assessments, statewide assessments. Those are helpful, sometimes useful, giving information about where you're strong and where you're weak. But the real key is formative assessment, is basically knowing which kids are getting it, which kids aren't, doing something about it quickly, and I'll talk about that in aligning instruction system support programs. So that student feedback systems, Smarter Balance has got a great initiative where they're putting together all kinds of formative assessment tools. And again, nationally, there's a lot of work being done along these lines to find out how kids are doing, and we talk about that. Aligning instructional systems and support programs, that's just making sure that all the Title I and ELD programs and the various support programs, the health and social support programs are all working together and sharing information. And the big, one of the best examples of that is something called RTI, response to intervention, which is really response to instruction. It's not a special ed initiative, or shouldn't be. It's really a general ed, special ed. Teach it right the first time. Intervene when the student's having problems learning it, and do something right away, and then and only then give some specialized help by these organized programs. California is probably laggard in that area. Other states have really, I think, gone further, and it's now called multi-tiered instruction. But there's a fellow named John Hattie, Hattie, who wrote a book, a study called Visible Learning, and he has a recent one in I think 5 years ago. And the idea of visible learning is involving the student in his or her education along with the teacher, so it's a kind of joint project, and that's a very powerful effect. He has essentially done studies of about 15,000 studies and of intervention of what things work when you intervene, when you have programs that are applied to schools. And he did by effect size. So effect size of one standard deviation is about 2 years growth, which is huge. And the one at the top of the list, other than visible learning, was this response that was RTI squared, or multi-tiered instruction. It's just a very powerful tool for coordinating. But others like reciprocal teaching or questioning or direct teaching sometimes, or a whole variety of ones. We're getting 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, 0.6. Those are big effect sizes. And it's a really interesting book that some of you might want to look at. Anyway, technology support for instruction, data assessment, that's been thoroughly talked about. We go into that. And then the fiscal and human resources support implementation, that kind of overlaps with that aligned instruction. And that really comes up in this state because every district's now going to have to adopt publicly, or with community input and parental input, a plan for their local funding plan, and that's got to align with Common Core. So this planning guide is really helpful, and it's got to not just go to the fiscal people in the district, but the fiscal people have got to work with the instructional people and say, okay, if we want to build teams at the school site, we're going to have to allocate so many for time so that teachers can talk to each other, or we have to allocate money to support our principals and how to do this, whatever it's going to take to put it through. And this is what many districts are doing. The higher ed one is important. Many districts have joined forces. They've done a partnership with their schools of ed and in our state, the California State Universities or their UC campuses. Let's take Long Beach as an example. Many are doing, they are doing induction with them. They've had joint sessions on what should go into the curriculum Common Core in both undergraduate and in their studies. Our CTC, which is the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, has put this into credentialing and their oversight over the schools of ed. Schools of ed have been participating. I know the UC system and CSU have been having convocations about how to do this, and they've come up with some good things. But even things as simple as in an area, a buyer's co-op, where districts get together and say, look, we're going to set standards for who we hire, and we're going to communicate those to the people that produce many of our teachers, which is our local CSU. That's a very powerful thing to do. So they were talking about what goes in the curriculum for candidates, induction, mentor teaching, mentor support, all the kinds of things that make for a much better professional system. This kind of basically is one of the keys in other districts or states or countries that have, again, gone from mediocre to world class. They've attended to beefing up the profession, giving it more prestige, and attending to getting high caliber people to come into the profession and then making sure they support them as they go through the chairs. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to stop now because I've been talking for about a half hour and see if anybody has any questions you want to type in or want me to respond to anything.
And I did open up the microphone right, so if you all have a microphone, feel free to click if you ran through the audio setup wizard, under Tools, Audio Setup Wizard, you can go ahead and press the talk button and use your microphone.
Or you can chat.
Dr. Honig, this is Roland Baker, and it sounds like, to me, the overall view of what we're looking at is putting a lot more logical thinking about the approach to education here in the next few years, rather than where we've been in the past 10 or so.
I think that's a good comment. The Common Core standards, I think, to me, they're good in their own right in the sense that they have a logic to them. And the people that did them, with a lot of input from teachers and professionals and so forth, really try to find out what people are doing and what the logic of other countries. And so they looked at the National Council of Mathematics. Adding it up, they've come out with some very good materials in the last 4 or 5 years. They used those, and those were the ones that said, look, it's a combination. It's this twirling connection between procedural knowledge, between conceptual understanding and application, and strategic knowledge in mathematics. When to use fractions or when to use a decimal, and kind of just number sense type of idea. So there is a logic to it based on research and experience of our best people and experience within the world. And the same thing is happening in English language arts. The logic there is, look, we don't want to go so far that we neglect some things of the procedures, but we also don't want to throw out the liberal arts idea as water. And so I think we've had such support for Common Core as opposed to some other states, because as we did the frameworks, we had focus groups all over the state. A lot of people were involved in that. We had a review session, 2 of them for 60 days. That's 120 days of review for each of the frameworks. A lot of people weighed in on that. We had open sessions. They could watch them on television from the Instructional Quality Commission when we adopted these things. The counties have had, and the districts have had a lot of input and discussion with their staff. So this just didn't hit out of the blue. Most people have looked at the framework, get a general idea. The basic take that I see from most teachers is, yes, this This is what we want for our kids. It's going to be difficult. We don't know if we can pull it off. It's going to be really hard to get there. It's going to take 5 to 10 years, but it's absolutely necessary. I think that's a healthy way of looking at it. So Common Core to me is a catalyst for having the kind of discussion about how to put this in place and what kind of changes and modifications to make as we go along. And that's so different than what we've done before. We've adopted a framework, we've adopted books, they go in, they use the books, and then not that many people talk about, okay, where's it working well and where can we do it better? And that's what other places have done such a good job on that capacity building, and they have a much more flexible system, and they have a much more responsive system, and I think that's the way we have to go too.
At the start of the session, you were sharing some of the resources. Jason was showing the screen and sharing resources from Long Beach and other areas. I'm assuming that's a web page where we can go and download those resources for those of us in the session and others and share freely?
Absolutely. They both said anybody's welcome to go to their websites and download anything you want. We are also the consortium that I talked about, which is the CTA and AXA and school boards and PTA and the counties and the Department of Education and the Board of Education and the advocacy groups, that whole broad group. And you can see they're listed in this leadership guide, the list of a lot of the people who did this. We are going to sponsor we have a web page, actually. You can go to the consortium. I think it's called the California Consortium on Common Core implementation, something like that. And there is on Brokers of Expertise, there is a page. There's not much on it yet, but we are basically going to try and take, we've got about 15 task forces now looking into the use of technology, or a lot of the subjects I already mentioned. And each one is going to have kind of exemplars of places that are doing this really well and people you can talk to. We'd like to get a forum discussion going, so if somebody wants to have a conversation about, hey, I tried to implement the math framework, and how do you do it? The fifth grade assumes they've got all this stuff coming up, that they've had 1, 2, 3 for K1, 2, 3, 4, but we don't have that yet, so what are you doing about that? Or how are you handling integrated math? Or what are you doing about whatever the issue is? So a place to go and have links to materials, support documents, exemplars, and people, we think really will help this collaborative nature. And as you know, as the people from Santa Cruz County here on there, the counties have done a great job on this in the county areas. And this initiative, actually, Dave Gordon, Sue Stickle, were part of one of the initiators of this whole movement and have been active in it. For example, technology, John Fleischman from Sacramento and the fellow from, I think, San Mateo, they've been instrumental working with the department people and district people on trying to figure out how to help districts as they try to implement the assessment from Smarter Balance. And they've got a website up now, which is very good. Which I forget the name of it, but we'll be able to find it. You can actually just Google support for technology support, and you'll find it. I think it's I forget it anyway. Yeah, Be Tech Ready. You got it right there, Jason. Good for you. Be Tech Ready. That's it. Okay. Any other questions?
Dr. Honig, quick question about, you mentioned curriculum and, or the lack thereof for Common Core specifics. What are your thoughts on supplemental open educational resources? There's a huge movement, across the globe for free educational resources out there. There's lots of new startups and for-profits trying to provide free open source resources with a service provided where districts can pay for hosting content, etc., but the actual the curriculum itself or the content is free. How do you envision schools vetting all of this stuff that comes in or that's out there on the web?
Yeah, well, that's what I was. That's what I was implying when I was talking about this ability to mix and match, using an architecture, say, from a framework on a scope and sequence. Then now you know what your big areas and chunks are and how much time you want to devote. And this consortium, we are actually going to probably going to put together an effort to do some protocols to help districts out on this. And one of the sponsors of it is Lisa Petrides, who's from that open source group down in Monterey. And they have lists of what's available, and they get teacher feedback on it. And so we'd like to have that. We'd like to include the proprietary information about that. Eventually have some like consumer reports from different people on here's where we think the strengths and weaknesses are. This is where the forum idea can come in, where people can comment what's really they liked or disliked or had some problems with. Even the publishers now, Pearson has said that they are going to not just produce the book, but they are going to produce it and willing to go 2.0 on materials as they get feedback from districts and teachers on how well it's working. That's the kind of first for major publishers to do something like that. And Mike Kerson, the Board of Education, and the Department, Tom Adams and Tom Torlickson, have said they're going to try and initiate a change in how we adopt books in the state, so that we just don't adopt them and that's it, but we basically have a more flexible system, whereas if a publisher wants to, they can come in and revamp what they've done and have a mechanism for doing that. So the inclusion of free to open source, proprietary apps, some people have seen something like Motion Math, some of you have seen that, a little tiny app that's great for fraction understanding. And then there's some proprietary things like Lexia for foundation decoding and phonics skills. Some of them are, some of them charge, some of them don't. There's freereading.com, which doesn't. And again, there's some places that have, like the Engage New York, you can copy it, the math and the English one, but then you can go to that site I mentioned, which is commoncore.org, and go to Eureka Math, and they have a very slow classroom. I think it's like $20 or $30 for a whole classroom a year, and you can use all their lesson plans and materials and whatever for all this material that was developed for $6 million for New York. You can get it for on the cheap. So there's going to be a lot of that going on. I think the question is accurate. All right, anybody else?
Well, Dr. Honig, keep us in mind too with TCAL. Any way we can help assist as you move ahead in our dissemination of resources. We have quite a bit up on our portal already on the Common Core, but anything specifically, especially with the part you were talking about, the embedded technologies to help assist. Those are areas where we could be more than willing.
Yeah, thanks for the offer, and I will take you up on it. I see this website here. In fact, I'm going to click on it right now. So, unfortunately, we lost the CLearn. That one's up in the air now, and I hope they resurrect it, because that was giving some good information about technology materials that I think the counties were doing, or San Joaquin was doing. But this kind of technology information center, everybody's now agreeing we can't all just put our stuff on our own site. We're going to have to share the links back and forth, and how you find things is going to be more and more important, because you get overwhelmed with the amount of material that's available. So how to help me think through this one? That's what we want to do, and I assume you do here, which is, take me through it. Here's some things you got to read first, and gives you a good perspective on it. And then if you want to go deeper, here's some other kinds of materials that are available. And that's where I think a good forum can help, because they can have like guides like they do in the gaming world, where they help you. If you want to do the following, here's some basic information. Go from here, and I think that would be very helpful. You have it there. You got what, tutorials and things like that.
Right. We have a lot of tutorials and items we've had out, and our superintendent here in our county is very committed to keeping the project moving ahead. We partner a lot with AXA, and it's just it's a firm passion behind the site to help leaders stay informed so they can actually lead the schools and not just be kind of tailing along. I think that many times they feel like they don't know enough to actually lead the schools in these areas. And we have a tremendous challenge in front of us in the next few years. So it's going to take a lot of work on everyone's half, I think, to do this. This was a fascinating talk today, and I really enjoyed your perspective on many of the issues. It was very good.
Who's talking? Who is this?
That was Roland Baker.
Roland, okay. All right.
Sorry about that.
Well, if there's no more questions, thank you all for the opportunity to talk about this with you. Any other final questions, remarks people want to make? I just want to say this is it's exciting for me that this is such a kind of broad effort in the state, which I think sets California apart, that people are really figuring out how to network, how to find information, how to collaborate. A lot of districts now are in networks with other districts. They're not trying to do it just on their own, or they're collaborating with their counties, some of the smaller districts in the county to get this implementation done. And they're seeing the bigger issue. It's not just implementing a math curriculum and standards or English language arts standards, but also it's really changing the way we do business at the district and site level, and using Common Core as a catalyst to do that. Because on the one hand, you can't really implement Common Core unless you do something like that. And secondly, that's really where we need to go as an enterprise anyway. So thank you all for doing that.
Thank you for your vision and this passion of yours. I think, with the right pieces at the helm, I think we're going to really make some differences in student success and students' lives and relevancy and creativity and rigor in what we're preparing our students for in college and careers. And definitely we can't do it alone individually in the 1,000 districts we have in California. We have to team up and do it as a whole. So thank you for that vision.
Is this going to be available to anybody else, or how does that work?
You bet. It will be archived on admin20.org, which is actually the TCALS forum, a global forum for school leaders to connect and learn from each other online. But I will send you the link once it's available, which will probably be in the next 24 hours or so, and then you can access the entire recording.
Okay, that would be helpful, because then I can kind of publicize it too.
My pleasure.
All right, thank you guys.
And School Leadership Summit continues for one more hour this evening and tomorrow for a couple hours. So please join us at schoolleadershipsummit.com. Thank you.